Welcome back to CrimsonCast. Galen Clavio joining you. Our podcast week continues as Indiana's playing in the Big Ten Championship in football. Big game in basketball coming up on Saturday as well. Volleyball playing in the NCAA tournament, hosting in the NCAA tournament here in Bloomington coming up Thursday and Friday. Just so much going on, and we continue to roll out the content for you. If you missed it earlier this week, Rhett Lewis's Big Red Carpet fully in action on the main feed. Of course, you've got his breakdown of Purdue, and then over on his Substack under the subscriber area, full film breakdowns of that game. And hopefully there will be another interview coming up later this week, we're hoping. Yesterday, I had Stefan Krajisnik from Cleveland.com on to talk about the matchup. Great conversation with Stefan. And we got another special guest from the Ohio State side of the ledger joining us today. We'll get to that right after the promo read. First of all, before we get started with all of this, just a reminder, we are brought to you by Homefield Apparel, your place to go for the finest in college fashions, the softest fabrics, the coolest designs. If you were watching the show yesterday, you know that they've launched another new item for IU and also for Ohio State, a Big Ten Championship Showdown shirt. And if it's still Tuesday where you're at, you can get 30% off still at Homefield Apparel. Use the code HOMEFIELD30 and get 30% off your order. It's a great deal. That's a significant amount of savings, so go take advantage of that ASAP. Go to homefieldapparel.com. If you're in Bloomington, check them out on Kirkwood, Homefield at Tracks. And we'll be doing some stuff with the Homefield folks this weekend, so keep an ear out for that. And we also, just a reminder, brought to you by the Posh Hotel in Bloomington. Go to poshhotelbloomington.com for the finest in luxury accommodations located at Kirkwood and Washington Streets. You can get beautiful views of downtown and campus while taking advantage of the many amenities within the Posh Hotel. Again, poshhotelbloomington.com. Happy to have them on board here at the Back Home Network.
The conversation starts here. The assembly call is IU basketball. Live post-game shows, smart midweek breakdowns, and no empty hot takes. Jared Morris, Coach Brian Tonsoni, Andy Bottoms, and Ryan Phillips dissect lineups, sets, and recruiting so you know what really happened and what it means for the Big Ten season, March, and beyond. Join the live chat on YouTube, then catch the podcast on Spotify and Apple. Just search Assembly Call and be part of Hoosier Nation's most trusted post-game tradition.
And we are back, and we've been bringing back all the favorites from last year. I felt like we never had the opportunity to do like legitimate IU Ohio State football discussion. This is 2 years in a row. We had Stefan Krajisnik on yesterday. We've got Dane Sanzenbacher from 97.1 The Fan in Columbus joining us today. Dane, great to have you back on the show, my friend. How you doing?
Doing well. Yeah, it doesn't feel like that long ago we were doing this. And the feeling at the time was, I don't know if we're going to get to do this again, but here we are, dead wrong in this game, even bigger than the last time we spoke.
Yeah, I had to look it up, and I didn't believe it when I first looked at it. It was only 53 weeks ago that game last year happened. It was right at the end of November, right before rivalry week, and that's maybe a great place for us to start because, last year Indiana came out of nowhere and I think was fifth in the CFP standings going into that game. Ohio State was having a dominant season, and there were questions. It's like, well, can Indiana actually measure up against Ohio State in Ohio Stadium? And, while it was in some parts closer than what people remember, realistically, Ohio State was the superior team that day. And obviously Ohio State goes on, loses to Michigan the next week, and then comes back and marches through the college football playoff and wins. We are in a season where Indiana's over-under in Vegas was 8.5, and where the odds-on favorite to win the national title was not Ohio State at the beginning of the year. It was either Clemson or Penn State, depending on who you're asking. It's hard to say who's maybe had the more surprising season. IU for going 12-0 and having this level of success and this level of dominance, or Ohio State for being the Death Star this year and being so dominant in all of the games that they've played. I mean, let's reflect on that a little bit. It's somewhat wild that not only are we back in this same spot, but we've got two teams that are arguably better than the versions that we saw last year.
It is. It gets lost here, as you can imagine, and by here I mean in Columbus. I think because you get kind of Ohio State fans in general were kind of spoiled. So you get mid-season, and then the feeling around here is, oh, I knew it. I told you so. And we forgot, like, there was a lot of questions going into the season. We didn't know how good the quarterback was going to be. We'd never seen him play down. We knew we lost a lot of guys that were high draft picks. Like, how do we replace them? We had a new defensive coordinator. So there were a lot of questions. We've got like revisionist history now. It feels like it's like, oh yeah, this is just a continuation of last year. But even with that, to me, Indiana is the biggest story in college football. I mean, there's a lot of good ones. And this year is a really fun one, just looking at what the current college football playoff might look like and likely will, with it not being as blue blood heavy. I mean, there's a lot of people who are going to have a legit shot at this thing that it could be one of those years where, because if you look back at the last 10 years of, national champions, it's, a list of Alabama, LSU, Michigan, Ohio State. There's a lot of other names that are in the mix. I think that was probably the goal. I know it's always been a long-term goal, but the goal of this playoff system was supposed to be the promise of that. And this year, I think, embodies it more than even last year. But Indiana doing this again this year, last year, it was confusing to a lot of people. It left a lot of people like scratching, like, what is going on here? Are they that good? Turns out they were really good. And then they ran up against a couple teams that just had a ton of talent on the roster, and kind of the guys that like, okay, we've been here. I don't know that even the ardent, well, you are the ardent Indiana supporter. You would have expected this. I mean, you're looking at this team and it's like, I don't even have a specific thing to point at that here's how they're doing it. It'd be real easy. It was like, oh, you went and bought your roster and these guys were 5-star recruits elsewhere. You can't really say that. I mean, they do have a ton of experience on the team. I think that's a huge part of it. As you look at these guys have played a lot of football. But other than that, I mean, this is the NCAA, as much turmoil as they've been in. This is a dream to me. This is like the dream scenario to have a team that is doing something like this that isn't explained. Like that isn't like this is what you were hoping would come out of college football, that it wouldn't be all this is going to change and you're just going to have 5 teams that are the top and just going to be battling each other. And so, I mean, to me, compared to last year, I'm more surprised about this year's team, that they're better than last year's team and have proved it on more stages than they had the opportunity to, I guess, last year.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's kind of gotten lost because it happened relatively early in the season, like first half of the season, but going into Autzen and winning by double digits is just not something that happens.
That's the one.
Yeah. But you throw the Iowa game in, you throw the Illinois game in. I mean, they've been up for the challenge pretty much every time it's happened. And I'm with you in that, I mean, we talk about IU football 3 times a week, and we looked at the roster and said, well, everything broke their way. It's a much tougher schedule this year. It's real hard to win double-digit games, period, in college football unless you are at the absolute top of the talent food chain. And I think my pick going into the year was 10-2, and I felt real good about that. I was like, well, they'll be in the mix for a college football playoff bid, and if they can pick up one of the big road wins, great. But the fact that they finished the season undefeated, I go back to that question that you asked, like, how did they do it? How have they managed to piece this together? And it is, quite frankly, from my perspective, this coaching staff does 2 things incredibly well. They are insanely good at evaluating the talent that works the best for them. And that is not just a skill thing, it's also an effort and intensity level thing. And they do a great job of developing players into their system that have only been there for 4 months, 6 months, whatever the off-season span is. I mean, what's baffling to me in the best possible way is you look at the chart of players Indiana brought in through the transfer portal, and it is like a who's who of players that came out of nowhere to make incredible contributions. I mean, yes, Fernando Mendoza has been amazing, and he's one of those players. But, Khalil Benson and Lewis Moore and, Hosea Wheeler, who was at, Stephen Daly, who was at Kent State and, didn't have even particularly that good of a season while he was at Kent State last year. And you can kind of keep going down the list. And then you add that to the players that came back from last year. And it really is fascinating that it's all come together so quickly and so effectively, and that they've been as dominant, even more so than they were last year, when against a weaker schedule, they were exhibiting that same level of dominance.
Yeah, the players you list off, they're better now than they were last year. It'd be easy to say like, oh, you plucked all the best talent out of X, Y, or Z league. But yeah, I think this is a unique there's continuity with the staff. Obviously, you can see it on the field when you're watching this year's Indiana team, especially, is that it comes across as very disciplined, or it comes across as very efficient, but you can tell there's a cohesiveness on the staff. And I think that goes into selecting the guys that you want to fill these roles, because you know exactly what you do and you've been doing it. So I think that's a huge piece of it. I still like, part of me in all the changes in the current dynamics of college football, I'm still one of those that wants to believe in some magic that's in there. And, the NFL has a way of very efficiently finding a champion, right? It has it puts you in divisions. It makes you play multiple times. It will weed out and you get that champion. College football is still, and probably will for the foreseeable future, be set up in a way that you have to be good. You have to be prepared. You have to catch the breaks when they're afforded you, and don't let them pass you by. Because if you don't come back against Penn State, if you don't make that last, if Omar Cooper's foot's on the line, let's just say, right, which we were a half inch away, yes, it's on the line. You're looking, it's not that Indiana is better or worse than they are right now. They're the same team. They've put that on the field, and that was, they're a good, solid team. But if that doesn't happen in college football, everybody changes their view now. Now you've all changed your perspective of what you think Indiana is. Now they go from this team that's legit contender to, I don't know, they shouldn't have struggled against Penn State. And whether that's fair or not, that's the college football world. And it's part of what makes it so fun to watch, is that you're when these matchups come, like the Ohio State and Indiana, who knows what's going to happen here? You still have to, even Ohio State last year had to catch some breaks to get a national championship. It didn't matter if they were or weren't the best team in college football. To win the postseason tournament that is now the CFP, it takes a strip fumble in the Texas game to go the other way. I mean, things have to break your way. And if you're an Indiana fan, things are starting to break your way. I mean, you see this, you have to feel oh, those things are happening to us. These things don't ever happen to us, I mean, I'm married to a Hoosier. I think we should preface, I think some people know, but I mean, Indiana is very prevalent in my household. And so I've been watching these things, or these seasons, before last year, and the things were not breaking the right way for a long time. And now they seem to be in a spot where there's just a glow around the program. Yeah,
it was like living in a house of broken mirrors if you were rooting for Indiana football, in that it always felt like if something was going to go wrong, it would go wrong. And I mean, the last bowl appearance that Indiana was in prior to the college football playoff last year was a great example of that. That Gator Bowl, actually, I wasn't the last. It was the second to last. The Outback Bowl was its own separate set of broken mirrors. But that Tennessee game where Indiana's got a double-digit lead in the fourth quarter, and they get scored on and then don't defend the onside kick, and then Tennessee drives down the field, and that's it. I mean, that felt like the culmination of a good, the traditional good season in IU football is you get a few breaks and then everything falls apart. But it's funny because your wife texted me a month and a half ago, his wife was one of my students, for those who don't know. Allie, I've known Allie for over a decade now, and we still text regularly about IU sports, but she texted me something about like the mindset for IU fans has to shift. And I think it finally shifted about halfway through this season, where, constantly you've got your guard up as an Indiana fan because you're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. You're not used to good things happening. And this is kind of what I was thinking about last year's matchup between these two teams. As much as people were optimistic about IU, the moment that something bad happens, the lingering doubts like leap forward, and you're like, well, we're not supposed to be here. We're not supposed to be in this. This isn't going the way it's supposed to go, but that's by design. And to slowly watch people coming around and to watch like a real culture developing around football has been incredibly fun, and not something that I thought I would ever see. Now, I'll be the first to say, like, there's a long way to go to develop the broad-based football culture that you see at a lot of those blue bloods that you've talked about. But so much of that really comes down to stringing together results year after year and giving the fans a reason to believe and a reason to have faith. And that's been my thing. I mean, there have been moments, this kind of goes back to your point about coaching continuity. There have been individual moments where people have been frustrated. Indiana kicked a field goal in the second quarter against Maryland, and people were like, why are we doing that? Or they struggle in the first half offensively against Wisconsin. And it's like, guys, I think this offensive coaching staff and the coaching staff in general deserve some credit and some faith that they know what they're doing. And again, I know even at the biggest of schools that doesn't happen regularly, but it's nice to start to see it taking hold with IU fans, because I think at the end of the day, they're in good hands with people that know what they're doing and can figure out, even when things are going wrong, how to get them back on track again.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I try to remind Allie sometimes, or just like, for everything that she lives in Columbus. So to her, I'm sure we're just like endlessly annoying, whether it's like the radio shows or just being here. But I'm like, be careful what you wish for, because this is what happens. Like, I went to, gosh, what game was it? Maybe UCLA. Yeah, UCLA at home here was the home game I went to at Ohio State. We didn't go for it on 4th and 6, and people are booing. So it's like you get to a point where you're like, they needed to see a touchdown every time, or there was like this. There's always just levels to what the expectation is and what the fans have. I think on the Indiana side, just from a relatively newcomer to consistently watching, difference between last year and this year is, regardless of, like, you could defend Indiana last year in theory, because you're like, the schedule is what it is. They played the teams, they beat the teams they needed to. They lost to Ohio State. They deserve to be in the playoff. That was like the big debate. But I think even on the Indiana side, you needed to see it. And that's why I say, like, they had a lot of big wins this year, but I think the Oregon game was the first time, like, everybody, you could see it.
Yeah.
Because it is widely accepted, tough place to play. Ohio State couldn't beat them there last year. And it was an actual battle of a game. This wasn't like Indiana ran through Illinois. Because even that, you're like, wait, how did that happen? What happened there? What kind of tricks was there? Like, what happened there? Unless you were watching the game. But at Oregon, you saw they looked every bit the part of up to the challenge and ready to go back and forth with Oregon. It's like, we don't have to run away from everybody. It's like going back and forth, playing discipline, just being a solid football team and winning without, a flair or a kickoff return or anything that was special. So it felt like that was the shift to me this year, when it's like, that one's undeniable. And I think that was like the national media wise too, that you just couldn't deny that one. You're just there. They've played well. The numbers back it up. You can look at all that stuff, but just the eyeball test, you're like, okay, at Oregon. And now Oregon did them a big favor by continuing to win. Like, they proved they're a good team too. So it's been, it's strange times in college football all over the place, with Vandy hanging on. They're also in that bunch of, like, there's just a reshuffling. It seems like who's going to be who, and it's going to be there's a window here where you have to, stake your claim.
Yeah, I mean, Texas Tech could get a bye. That's not something that we would have thought was possible. Ole Miss, who we've just kind of gotten used to being at least on the fringes of the discussion, has been right in the thick of things. I mean, these are household names, but they're not brands that are normally competing for national championships. And I think Indiana absolutely falls into that same category. So it has absolutely been fascinating to watch it unfold. On the Ohio State side, what is it that has allowed this Ohio State program to reset after winning a national title, losing all of that talent to the NFL, losing the highest paid defensive coordinator in the country to Penn State? That didn't work out for either of those parties. How have they done this? Like, what has been the secret sauce that's allowed them to coalesce around a first-year quarterback and bring in a new defensive coordinator and be so dominant, especially on defense, throughout the course of this season?
I think a lot of it has to do with similar to how IU has that continuity. Yeah, we lost Jim Knowles, but I think keeping your head man and a lot of the pieces around them, like your head coach, a lot of your position coaches, having stability at that spot, I think is so important during this time too. I think the coaches that have had like a lockdown, like Texas is another example. I mean, maybe they didn't have the talent or lost games they didn't need to be in that spot, but that's such an important piece right now because you don't have to continue to resell the vision. Like you get a lot of buy-in when you're Ryan Day and Ohio State coming off a national championship with your guys that are in-house to stay. Obviously, it takes money these days to keep all your A players. But even with that, having a young quarterback there's a lot of unknown there. They've got a lot of talent on their roster. They've got a lot of belief coming off the national championship. And a lot of the coaches that were there and a handful of the players were there and experienced it. So I think any gap there was, they were able to speed up that learning curve with the new guys that are playing a lot now. I don't think that they knew Matt Patricia would be this much of a positive influence. That felt at the time like this is a cute hire, I guess. This is just like
felt like a little bit of a reach. I think that was kind of
like, I haven't heard of Matt Patricia in a while. I don't know what he's been up to, but maybe this is just a thing. But whether it's a combination of all those coaches together, I think he's fit into the culture there. And maybe there's a piece of that that's staying out of the way of what's already working. I don't think he's tried to put his stamp on things. I think they're just in a good spot, and that helps you keep this thing rolling. Yeah, I want to say, you got to catch some breaks too. I think there's college football is funny. How good is it's funny. You can take like the number one team in the country and you can always ask, well, how good are they really? Because you can only play so many teams and there's a zillion, there's 140 some teams. So it's like, I don't know. They definitely exceeded expectations, I think, here. I think it's easy to look at and been like, oh yeah, they've been the dominant team. I didn't think we thought they would run through the schedule. Got a good week one against Texas, and that kind of sets everything on a good path. And really, as far as schedules go, preseason, you would have said it was a tough schedule, but as it played out, like Penn State was not who they were supposed to be. We didn't have Oregon. We didn't have Indiana. So it was really just a season bookended by Texas at the beginning, Michigan was the next one at the end, and show your stuff in between. So, I think they're a good team. They're, have earned that spot as well as Indiana has, but they're exceeding expectations, and it is it's hard to follow up a national championship season and still stay on top of that mountain for this long. That's a lot of wins in a row.
It is. Well, and it's interesting because Ohio State obviously has built a machine in terms of talent acquisition and training those players up. And there's always someone that is of really high caliber, it feels like, that is waiting for their opportunity to get on the field. And it's like normally when you have a championship that's won like that, you lose a ton of seniors or a ton of players who go on and get drafted. and you don't have as high or as well-trained a level of player to take their spot. Or even if you do, it doesn't work seamlessly. There's different things you have to do with the schemes, or you have to run different types of offense or defense to make it work. And they kind of had to do that anyway with the change in coordinator. But it is remarkable how, I think to some degree people have taken it for granted. I mean, I've been watching all of these preseason or these pre-game podcasts and reading analysis, and there's this expectation or this feeling like, well, of course Ohio State is doing this because it's Ohio State. It's like it's not that simple to just transition from a team that was able to march through the playoff and win, and then come back and have an undefeated regular season in a power conference. I think that Ohio State and Ryan Day really deserve a ton of credit for figuring out the alchemy with this roster that allows them to look as good as they do. And I mean, yeah, as an Indiana fan, given what happened with the schedule last year, I'm not the person to talk about, well, the schedule was weak, because you take advantage of what you have. But even when Ohio State played Illinois, like, that was a closer game statistically than people remember, but you never felt it once in that game like Illinois was a threat to win. Ohio State just dominated it. And I've been most impressed with just how seamless the turnover to this year has been. And it's I don't blame people, especially in the national media, where you're looking at this and all the names you're mentioning are Ohio State names. And really the question is, well, is Ohio State going to cover the 5.5 or whatever point spread it is? It is that type of a team. It's a team where you feel like you can take it for granted that they're just going to be the best team on the field, period. And I just don't think people realize how hard that is to do after having just won a national championship.
Yeah, you're reaching, and I haven't dug into the stats too much, but just obviously in my, I've following it my whole life on some level, just living in Ohio, but not closely. But from, let's say, 2007 on, I mean, you're touching into like unprecedented territory with this group. I mean, Ohio State you would consider them sure blue blood. Like, this is their program goes way back, like from the beginning of, when college football's really taken off. Like, we're going way back. So you're just always going to have that. But this version of Ohio State in this version of college football, you're getting to like a place that we haven't consistently been. Like when Urban was there, had a ton of success, but what this team hasn't done is lose the random game.
Right.
Ryan Day has not lost the one-off Big Ten game that Ohio State was a signature for doing. Even when I was there, we were good for one inexplicable loss in the Big Ten. It's just how it went.
Happened under Urban Meyer. They lose at Iowa in that random game. They lose at Purdue. I mean, it actually was something that would irritate me, because as I'm sure Ohio State's on a 29-game winning streak, 30 if you count the one that didn't count.
Yeah, let us be the random one.
But it's like, when do we get to be the random win against Ohio State? And it never happened. But Day has managed with this group to just eliminate that, which I find fascinating, because it is so hard to keep your team dialed in when you are that good against teams that are not quite as good but might have a great day.
Yeah, so that shifts the perception as well, because then you start looking at I think he's somewhere along the lines of like 82-10, 83-10 as a head coach at Ohio State. And those 10 are almost all in championship games or Michigan. That's like, I'm not sure what his other Big Ten losses are. I can't think of one off the top of my head, which is like that's a rare place. And in seasons like this, it ends you up with a bunch of wins and no losses. And stringing those back to back, not having lost a game since Michigan last year, that's a place even this program has not. I'd have to look at the numbers, but they've not been there in a while, if ever. I mean, you pop a national championship every once in a while, but you don't follow it up with another undefeated season. So they're in a really good spot. This matchup is so interesting because of that too. Because like you have these two programs who historically couldn't come from more polar opposite places, but are succeeding through the same like basic formula right now is like consistency in your coaching staff. You're doing the right things. I mean, it's just, this is I can see why there is so much interest in this Big Ten championship, or maybe it's just me. I mean,
no, there's
clearly you guys, but this is you need to see what happens here. Like there's a lot of questions that need to be answered.
Well, and it's not just the game, even though that's a huge part of it, but you add in that you've got the Heisman Trophy race perhaps being decided by this game. Julian Sayin versus Fernando Mendoza. They both had great seasons. Sayin's been more accurate. Mendoza's probably, been more prolific at times with I don't want to say a weaker supporting cast, but a supporting cast that's not as pro ready, perhaps would be a better way of putting it. And then you just throw in the general spectacle of, this is the first time Indiana's been in a Big Ten championship game. It's in their backyard, essentially. And Ohio State hasn't won a Big Ten title since, 2019?
Yeah, pre-COVID, right?
Yeah. So
I don't know if it was 17, but something like that sounds right.
Maybe it was 2020 because they did beat they beat Northwestern in the disputed Big Ten championship game in 2020. We won't talk about that too much on the show, but the point being, this is quite a spectacle. You rarely get number one versus number two, period. To get one in a conference championship game, and to get all of the other factors like the Heisman race, like the chance for Indiana to win their first conference title since '67. Ohio State with the chance to win their first one in 5 years. Both teams in, I think, good shape to get a bye in the playoff, regardless of what happens in the game. Normally that ratchets the interest level down. It feels like outside of some of the national folks, that hasn't had an effect at all. No one seems to be going into this saying, well, this game doesn't really matter. Both teams are talking the talk. The coaches have said all the right things. There's just a huge vibe around this game that you don't normally get, I think, for a Big Ten championship, and that's really cool.
Yeah, and I think they kind of, and I say they as in maybe the conference or committees, you get a little bit lucky with this one because everybody knows you've set up a system where you could have championship games that don't mean a whole lot. And by what the consequences of this one, you could say this is one. But the reality of who's in it and the stories behind it prop it up a whole lot. It'll be interesting to always see like what goes on with these, how you build these in to retain them or what they do moving forward. That's a whole, probably another podcast. But to have these two as the matchup, yeah, I think you're right. You turn like a game that, what are the consequences into this game has big implications on the playoff for both teams. It functions more as like a mid-season test. Like you need to see who you are against this group.
Right.
And without the downside of like, okay, this is a back against the wall. So I do think it'll be a different vibe. I do think, at least for Ohio State last year, there was a clear difference in this team when it was lose or go home versus just playing, figuring out who we are. So I don't know, but this is also, there's a lot different than this team versus last year's team. I mean, there's a different character to it. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right in saying that, sure, the consequences aren't the biggest, but there is still, it appears both these teams are still locked in. Nobody's saying like, well, maybe we'll rest our starters or maybe we don't want to get somebody hurt. That I don't think we're going to see that at all.
Yeah. It's weird though. It's funny you mentioned what the consequences are on the playoff side. Because I keep going back to what happened last year. Now the seeding's different, but if you think about what happened last year, Ohio, Oregon and Penn State play in the Big Ten title game. Winner's going to get the 1 seed. Oregon wins. They get the 1 seed. They get the Rose Bowl. and they get to play Ohio State in the second round because it's Ohio State, Tennessee is the 8-9. Penn State gets, let's be frank, a really easy draw. They get to play SMU in the first round. They get to play Boise State in the quarterfinal, and they get all the way to the semifinal without really having been tested against a power conference opponent. I mean, technically SMU is a power conference opponent, but come on. This game, actually, when you look at the bracket projections, and we talk about, well, the winner is going to be the 1 seed, and they're going to play in the Rose Bowl. Do you want to play the winner of Oklahoma versus Notre Dame if that's the 8-9 and you're the 1? No. Would you rather play? Yeah, right. Exactly. The answer is just straight up no, you do not want to do that. So it's like, well, if I'm the 3 seed, which I think is probably, if Georgia wins, where the loser of this game likely lands, because I think they're going to try to keep them on separate sides of the bracket. The 3 seed could end up playing, Ole Miss missing their head coach versus, I don't know, Virginia, perhaps, as the team that you would have in that matchup, with the winner of that game would be your quarterfinal opponent. This is the one thing about this format that I don't think has been fully figured out yet, is as much as the 1 seed is supposed to be the favored team, if you're not going to reseed after the first round, you could end up with a far tougher opponent than the 2 or the 3 seed, simply by virtue of what the ranking was, which might not have a whole lot to do with how good the teams were that were getting ranked in reality.
Yeah, it's a glaring problem, right? There's that the incentives are off with these championship games, and it's showed up particularly in the Big Ten championship the past 2 years, because what the benefit that Oregon got was nobody had to go play at Oregon, and they went out to a neutral site and got a really tough opponent who they probably didn't want to see that early in the tournament. So what is the benefit of a team winning the Big Ten championship in terms of what it means for the overall postseason, CFP picture? That's what they're going to constantly need to figure out, is how we make it, if there's enough of a carrot there. Because right now you're just banking on these schools will not try to play that game. Like it's just the honor system right now that, okay, right, you'll still try to win this game for the pride and glory, right? And it's just like, they will, but I think you're going to have to eventually bake it in, because it's just going to take one situation, whether it's Big Ten, SEC, any of them, to have one of the teams decide that the national championship's more important than this. And if this doesn't change our seeding, then I'm not going to put guys at risk. It'll only take one time for that to happen, and they're going to be like, okay, we got to figure this out.
I do like the idea that I've heard floated on the NFL level, like let the 4 bye teams draft who they want to play in the second round after the first round's over. So
I'm totally down for all that weird stuff.
Yeah, like, I mean,
yeah.
No, it's like whatever you can do, because again, like you said, like in basketball, it happens this way all the time in the tournament setting, where oh gosh, we're in a region with a really tough 2 seed, and who's going to get through them, and then they lose in the first round randomly, and it's like, well, okay, that cleared the way in a way that you wouldn't have thought it would. It just, when you lock these things in, I think it makes it a little bit difficult. But I think something you said earlier really is the key point, and maybe what we can get out of here on, which is both of these teams need this measuring stick of this particular game going up against each other for different reasons. Like, I think for Ohio State, this is the toughest opponent they will have played all year. Yes, I know Michigan is a tough opponent for Ohio State to play from a psychological perspective. They get over that hump in a big way. That's certainly, I think, going to help them in their overall pursuit of a national title. But on paper, this is the second best team in the country by a pretty significant margin. It's a team that's almost in a statistical dead heat with Ohio State in so many categories. They need that test going into the playoff to see where they measure up, because a lot of the teams they played haven't really been at that level. For Indiana, this could be the game that says, okay, yes, we belong in this conversation on this stage if you've got questions about whether we're supposed to be here, we point to the result of this game and we say, yes, on a neutral field, not at Ohio Stadium, we were able to take this team on and win the game. And I think for Curt Cignetti and this staff and this group of players, this is the kind of game that they've been wanting for a long time, because they were really embittered, I think, not just about the way that they lost to Ohio State, not just about the way they lost to Notre Dame, but the discourse that came after those games, which was, well, Indiana clearly wasn't on that level. Indiana clearly didn't.
I wasn't allowed to say the word outclassed in our house for like two months. It was triggering. I wasn't allowed to go there.
I get it. I understand. Well, and look, I get the argument, and I think those were two different games, but they led a narrative that got kind of spun up by the national media that existed all throughout the offseason, that Indiana was an interloper, that they had ridden a weak schedule and favorable sentiments from voters to get to where they were at. This year has been kind of one long stretch of Indiana saying, nope, that's not true. Look what we've done here and here and here. But you've got to beat the best to be the best, to paraphrase, a great wrestling philosopher. And this is a chance to do that in a much more favorable environment than you got last year when you played the same team.
Much more favorable. And I think you're right. You could split these things up into separate categories, because all the things you said about the seeding and your path, and it's the same thing that happens in basketball, in that like it has a bigger field, so it is able to kind of weed its way through a little bit better. But the way I look at these things, because it is so hard to get through a tournament structure, and it's never going to be totally equal in the college landscape. It's really hard to create what the professional leagues have on this level, that it's like it kind of lives separate as a postseason tournament. Like, and if viewed that way, that like, okay, these are two things, the regular season, and then there's our postseason tournament. This game is hugely important on how you then attack that postseason tournament. I think it was for Ohio State last year. They didn't get to play in this game. They lost to Michigan. It was the only thing they had, and they played like they were on fire. They showed the talent that felt like it had been like sitting in the wings. But if you're Indiana in this game, I mean, this is a who we are now as a program type game. Like this has, I don't even see it as what are the playoff implications. This is you said, like answering those questions that you mentioned that continually come up of, okay, well, what about on this stage? This is the one that puts you on that next level. Forget what happens in the tournament. Like you figure out the playoff then, but this would be a huge statement, and one that you hang your hat on for a couple years from now. And we know that what you do this year affects next year. We've seen it this year. Indiana wouldn't have climbed so fast had they not had such a great season last year and been able to start at that ranking and that spot to kind of elevate themselves up. So yeah, I think on its own level, and it'll seem kind of I'm sure Oregon doesn't take any kind of like a moral victory from being Big Ten champions last year. But on some level they should. And I think that Ohio State and Indiana both seem to be pursuing this game in that way. And I think for Indiana, yeah, this caps your season. To me, the playoffs, that's just all gravy. That's all like that's icing. And even so, how you play against Ohio State, okay, both teams will figure out in this game where they stand, where they rank.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, these are a bunch of college kids, and they're very good college kids and very good football players. But the energy that you've got going into this postseason tournament, I think is going to matter a lot. So what you pull out of this game, win or loss, what you've learned from it about your own team, I think will no doubt have huge implications in the postseason.
It may not be the last time we see these two teams play each other this season.
Yeah,
I mean, it's entirely possible, especially if they get put on opposite sides of the bracket. I would certainly be down for a rematch in the Orange Bowl. regardless of what happens on Saturday.
But, it depends. If because I don't think the other team's going to beat the other one twice. So if we win this one, I don't want to see it again. If we lose, I'd be happy to see it again.
All right. Well,
I think it's going to be very hard to beat either of these teams twice.
I think you're right. I think they're both excellently coached teams. They're both teams with a lot of great players. I'm fascinated to see what the crowd looks like. That's the one thing. Ohio State historically has come in and taken over Memorial Stadium. Lucas Oil Stadium, either Ohio State fans already bought their tickets or Indiana fans are buying tickets off of Ohio State fans. The prices are insane to get in this game. I have no idea what the crowd composition is going to look like, but it's going to be a lot more even than we're used to, even when Indiana's played Ohio State at home.
That's a huge part. And I know you talked about that, but going into Ohio Stadium, as they had to do last year, and it had real effects on the game. It's not just like that's a real advantage. That won't, regardless of the percentage of the makeup, will not be a factor in this neutral site game. You're going to get both teams kind of unhindered by, the other's noise. It's going to be quite a sight, and I don't even know quite how I feel about it, Galen. I don't know if it's a win-win or a lose-lose for me. I have not decided yet.
You might be the only man in America for whom it's both.
It might be both. I'm just gonna watch. I don't know. It's all gonna balance out. The happiness in my household will balance out.
There you go. I like it. Well, Dane, as always, a pleasure to have you on, and we'll hopefully talk again before the season's over, as both these teams have played exemplary football, and it's been great watching the Big Ten having arguably the three best teams in the country this year, and these two teams are in that. They're the top two in the country, and that's not an accident. So we look forward to chatting with you soon. Again, you can catch Dane on 97.1 The Fan in Columbus, and whenever Ohio State and Indiana play on CrimsonCast as one of our permanent correspondents in the Columbus area. I appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Absolutely. As always, thanks for having me.
Thanks. And thanks to all you folks for listening. Again, this is CrimsonCast. We'll have more content coming up later this week. Indiana, Ohio State, Big Ten Championship, Lucas Oil Stadium. We'll be there throughout the course of the day. We'll catch you folks on the flip side. Stay never daunted. So long, everybody.